and welcome to Scam TV. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Nick Henley. I'm the founder of the nonprofit organizations stampoutscams.org and scamtv.org. So we receive numerous emails through our main website at stampoutscams.org. Many of these emails are from actual victims of scams. Lots of times these victims are looking for guidance on where to report scams, how to report scams, and other general inquiries. Many times these victims want to share their stories in order to help prevent others from being scammed. As you will agree, this is a noble gesture and we certainly appreciate it. We try to share as many of these stories as possible. Now, why? Because it helps others learn. These victims' stories are often heart-wrenching and filled with emotional and financial loss. Of course, their stories are very important to hear, but because they often help expose the scammers and their tactics. So we carefully select stories that will have the most significant impact and alert others to the dangers of scams, particularly romance scams. We often share these stories where the victim, when we only share the stories when the victims give us their consent. Additionally, we choose to highlight stories where there is supporting documentation of the alleged scam. So, supporting documentation can include pictures a scammer may have sent them, documents, banking information, etc. So this supporting documentation not only helps us verify the authenticity of their story, but it helps expose the scammers and provide information that is helpful for law enforcement. So in this video, we are going to highlight one such victim who was caught up in a romance scam. Her story is involved, but it is a great window into how many of these romance scam operations really work. Because of how involved this particular story is, we can't relay the crucial information in just one video or one blog post. So this victim story will be shared over a series of blog and video posts. This will help to fully convey the tactics used by this scammer and the great lengths he went through to deceive this victim. In addition to a blog post, we'll also tell her story through video on our YouTube channel, Scam TV, and at our sister site, scamtv.org. In this true story, we will keep the victim anonymous, referring to her by the pseudonym Brenda, and altering her actual location for privacy purposes. This is a victim's choice, and we respect it and completely understand. Obviously, we don't know the scammer's real name, as he resides in Nigeria and uses a fake identity. Now, speaking of fake identities, the scammer's main backstory was that he worked for the Pentagon Undercover Army and was currently in Ukraine helping in the war effort. Because his work was so secret, he couldn't talk about it, which is a common theme among romance scammers. So we will use the alias the scammer used to deceive Brenda and the copies of real documents he provided her during the scam. So we do this to help expose his tactics and documentation he utilizes during his scam. This is crucial since he likely reuses his lies, names, backstory, and documents in various other scams. So maybe someone out there will recognize it and speak out. If you do, please do not hesitate to send us an email at info@stampoutscams.org. With that said, let's go ahead and watch the first part of this story. Please pay close attention to the scammer's backstory, his psychological manipulations of Brenda, and his continued effort at making an emotional connection. Thank you, and let's watch.
Deception. Unveiled. Brenda's journey through a web of a romance scam. This story of Brenda's journey through a romance scam is a poignant tale being told to highlight the dangers of online deception. Her real-life experience sheds light on the emotional and financial devastation these scams can cause. Through careful storytelling, Brenda's story will be an eye-opener for many. Mark, the scammer, initiated contact with Brenda via Facebook, using shared religious beliefs as a foundation. Their interactions started naturally, discussing scripture and daily life, which gradually led to a deepening bond that continued during future communications. Mark mentioned his mother's last name when she attended school in Minnesota was Jamie. He claimed she went to school there in the late 80s. Being that she never really existed and was made up by Mark, Brenda did not recognize the name. His supposed mother from Minnesota actually only existed in Mark's carefully crafted notes that he always kept by his computer. Despite his story's Minnesota ties, he stated he had never lived there and resided in New York, where his father and son currently lived. Mark crafted a compelling story, claiming to be a soldier stationed in Ukraine. He leveraged shared details about his late mother attending the same Minnesota school as Brenda, evoking sympathy through their Christian connection. To add credibility to his deception, Mark shared photos supposedly depicting his life in Ukraine, complete with military attire and local landmarks. Brenda's empathy grew as she connected with his struggles and experiences. Mark's vivid descriptions of army life, camaraderie, and logistical issues subtly set the stage for future financial requests. Brenda became emotionally invested, eager to support him in any way possible. In order to create even more of a bond, Mark told Brenda his mom often spoke of how wonderful life was in Minnesota when she was growing up. He actually feigned like he was crying when evoking memories of his mom. He told Brenda she had actually passed away recently and he missed her so much. The conversation deepened when Brenda shared personal details about her parents, her father's passing 2 years previously, and her 96-year-old mother's vitality. Mark reciprocated with his own family history, mentioning his father who was originally from Texas, but grew up in New York. Strangely enough, despite his mother's background having deep Minnesota ties, Mark had never been there. He told Brenda when he wasn't overseas saving the world, he resided in New York, so he could be near his father and son. However, once his tour overseas was done, he was going to visit Minnesota to see what a beautiful place it was. And of course, to meet Brenda in person. Even with some glaring inconsistencies, like Mark's claim of never living in Minnesota while having ties there, his story deepened Brenda's connection. Personal details exchanged further solidified the fake relationship. Even his claimed last name of Belesima was different for the Minnesota area, but Brenda reasoned it was probably because it was his father's last name. Their mutual faith strengthened their bond, with Brenda offering prayers for Mark's safety. His gratitude reinforced their emotional connection, making Brenda more trusting of his narratives. By sharing documents and images to bolster his fake identity, Mark deepened Brenda's emotional investment in his fabricated story. The deception was designed to establish authenticity and credibility. Mark effectively mirrored Brenda's experiences and emotions, creating a connection that made his story believable. This psychological manipulation deepened Brenda's trust, increasing her susceptibility to his pleas. By aligning his stories with Brenda's personal journey, Mark employed classic psychological tactics, fostering familiarity and deep trust. These manipulations made Brenda overlook inconsistencies, leaving her vulnerable. The psychological impacts of Mark's tactics were profound, affecting Brenda's self-esteem and trust. Victims often blame themselves, feeling shame and guilt, which can lead to isolation and future relationship challenges. Understanding these manipulations is crucial for providing victims the support needed to recover. It's important to recognize these impacts and offer appropriate resources to help victims rebuild trust and self-confidence. Our telling of Brenda's story is just beginning. But stay tuned, because her story illustrates how scammers meticulously plan their schemes. You will see that each interaction builds trust and emotional investment, showcasing the orchestrated layers of deceit used by scammers. Brenda's experience serves as a classic example of a romance scam originating out of Nigeria. It exemplifies the tactics scammers commonly use in carrying out their devious plans. Recognizing these patterns helps individuals protect themselves and their loved ones from falling victim to similar scams. One thing we need to point out before we close is that all of Mark's communications with Brenda up until this point were through email. Romance scammers prefer email over phone or video calls because it allows them to hide their true identity, accent, or appearance, which could easily expose them in real-time interactions. Email also gives them the flexibility to carefully craft responses, making it easier to manipulate emotions and build trust over time. Additionally, emails allow scammers to maintain multiple ongoing scams simultaneously without the immediate pressure of live conversation. And for those of you out there wondering why Mark did not ask for money in this story, spoiler alert, this story is far from over. Let's just say the likelihood of Mark the romance scammer asking for money is very, very high. So tune back in to find out for sure. Stay informed and engaged as Brenda's story unfolds. Learn more about these scams and how to safeguard against them by visiting Stamp Out Scams and their sister site at scamtv.org. For more insights and strategies to prevent such schemes, don't miss out on the next chapter of Brenda's journey. Her story is a vital lesson in the fight against online scams, offering valuable tips for awareness and prevention.